This is what I have. This is to manage our work. Let us thank Roscongress for taking care of us. Of course, having this bell simplifies things. The topic of our forum, of our Congress, is wider, and we have a very specific topic of the session, which is about religion and economy, and both answer the questions why and what for. And I'm absolutely convinced that the issues of economic nature never have been discussed, and perhaps our roundtable is doomed to be not quite successful, but let's try. And I would like to quote Patriarch Kirill's recent words published in Kommersant just on the eve of the forum. He said, economy is the competitive sphere. Of course, I'm taking these phrases out of the context, and I hope I don't distort the meaning. But there are no situations in the life of a person, even most complicated one, which do not fall under the influence of the moral law, which it means treat others as you want to be treated. I think that he said it, and it was printed not by chance on the eve of our forum, economic forum, because whatever economy, we have to always remember about the moral content and the frameworks, the moral framework which reminds us and limits us in the rightful way, reminding us why we live, what for, and why and what for our economy is. The order or resolution on the moral values prompts our thoughts about the economic prerequisites that provide for the execution of the traditional conventional values outlined in this resolution, and whether this is envisaged in the budget and in other plans, whether the budget of the Russian Federation has space for that. And I am burning to ask now the representative of the Ministry of Education and Science in Russia, what are the economic opportunities or resources that the ministry has to realize the tasks that proceed from the resolution on the traditional values. Of course, I would like to hear about such important aspects as the resolutions of the president and the legislative acts about the importance of giving the churches and cathedrals the facilities back to the church. And the question is whether there are economic opportunities for implementation and taking such decisions and structuring and developing the program for reconstruction and development of temples, churches, cathedrals. And when we look for the answers to these questions, I hope to hear your opinions. And let me introduce the participants of our discussion, but in a moment later. There is another aspect I would like to focus you on, is the social economic status of the clergymen, those who work next to them, the status of those who formally do not have any job. In other words, do not have the labor agreement for taking up some jobs. And then how do the issues of their well-being and welfare are resolved? And what are the organizational and legal solutions that can help without even allocation of some extra funds, help them resolve the relevant issues? And I hope that you today will also touch upon this aspect. I hope that colleague also will suggest some other points of discussions, but I think that the above-mentioned questions already form the framework for our discussion. Let me introduce the presenters, the speakers. Unfortunately, of those speakers that have been planned, at least one cannot take place because the PCR test was failed. But I will just proceed from left to right. Nikander, chairman of the Financial Economic Administration of the Moscow Patriarchate, Metropolitan Nikander. Well, I have already asked certain questions, but of course you are free to raise some others. Also, I would like to introduce Karganov, Albert Revkatovich, whom I introduce as the leader of one of the three main areas or conventions that exist in our state, in Russia. But you are perhaps the closest of the partners. We work very actively under the auspices of St. Petersburg State University and St. Petersburg at large. So we would like to hear your valuable opinion on the above-mentioned questions. Also next to him is Buddha Badmaev, who is the Dit Kambolama, deputy head of the traditional Buddhist Sangha of Russia in the Northwestern Federal District, and also Ms. Petrova, deputy minister for education and science, and also Shipkov Alexander, rector of St. John the Theological Russian Orthodox University, and one of the heads of the Russian People's Assembly. Together with us is Gurievich Aron Yuryevich, the chief military rabbi of Russia, the head of the Department for Interaction with the Armed Forces, the Emircom of Russia, and law enforcement agencies of the Federation of the Jewish Communities of Russia. And I hope that you will take the place in the podium. I mean, Father Vasil Losev, head of the legal service of the Moscow Metropolitanate. And next to me is the head of the Institute of Theology under the St. Petersburg State University, Dmitry Shmonin, who is also the head of the Higher Attestation Commission in Theology under the Ministry of Science and Education, Higher Education in the Russian Federation. Let us agree that we will give each speaker 3 minutes, and after that we'll have the Q&A session so that we could ask some more specific questions. I would like to underline that on the decision of the leadership of the country, St. Petersburg State University, and also the Theological Association for Education, and also Association of Theology, entrusted with the responsibility to arrange roundtables on theology and culture, theology and other aspects, and the auspices of all the events of Roscongress events. And now I'm starting this round table, and the first floor is given to you. Thank you very much. Dear Nikolai Mikhailovich, Father and brothers and sisters, I would like to start by saying that religion and economy have been introduced here as the 2 parallel spheres of human life, but I hope that still religion is the baseline, the foundation of life, of any activity of a human being. And before our forum, I've been asked the question how religion and economy are linked, and I would like to remind all of the people in the audience about the story, the early period of human life, when the main commandment from the God was to a human being to start cultivation of the land. So the first commandment is to work. So labor, work, is one of the first commandments that exist in the holy texts. And even if we think that we are free from this responsibilities, and the question is whether we can realize our mission in life entrusted to us by the God. And of course, religion's beliefs is the baseline for their success in science. Why? Because any employer, any wise employer who runs the enterprise of any kind, organization of any kind, whether educational, production, or whatever facility, so is looking for the employees who would be hardworking and who would love to work, which means to work consciously. And what is consciousness? Consciousness is the category that tells us how we live. And of course, this refers to, first of all, religious people. And we all are interested in filling this world with religious people, because a religious person will be the start of a professional. Why so? Because a religious person is afraid of the God, lives by the consciousness, by the moral principles, and tries to work as hard and as nicely as possible. And takes any chance to grow professionally. Once again, it requires not only from the employee, but also from the employer, hard work and responsibilities. These are the two interlinked aspects. And any employer would like to have the conscious, responsible employee, and the employee, when working with the consciousness and responsibility, hopes to be understood and appreciated by the employer. And unfortunately, one of the fathers who was planned to participate here does not participate here. But when we speak about Resolution 809, unfortunately, it is not promoted. The majority of people don't know the content of this resolution, and people don't know. Namely, which values have been mentioned there. They don't know. Let us stop promoting it at large. I remember my school years. On the cover of the notebook, we had the multiplication table, we had the text of the anthem of Russia, but let us print the commandments there, the values there. The values is one of the values is that spiritual things are above all the material values and things. And we have to understand how we, on our personal level, can implement this resolution of the president. Because even if we know about this resolution, do we really implement it? I have here a representative from the Ministry of Education, and I would like to ask you to outline your vision. We speak about competences. We discuss it at large, and when we speak about a spiritual person, say a graduate from the university, let it be a lawyer, let it be a mining engineer. So we hope that this person would be able to use not only the knowledge and skills obtained, but to manifest himself as the human person who has developed. We have to bring this person back into the society after the university so that this would be a valuable member of the society. And you have touched, Mr. Kropachev, the topic of the destroyed temples, cathedrals, churches, and quite recently one of the resolutions mentioned from the resolutions of the president was ordering to restore about 1,000 facilities, religious facilities.
So this 1,000 facilities and sites, religious facilities, religious sites, are they part of that list? We haven't seen any debates at the level of the government. I'm sure that there's debate underway. It is the decree of the president. But, you know, we'd like to be engaged. We have some proposals. As for Orthodox sites, we have 7,000 ramshackle and rundown monuments. 7,000. I understand the federal budget doesn't have enough money, but at least let's, earmark funds for the next 5-10 years so that we have a timeline. There are some churches in the countryside. If it's a rural area which people left, it's impossible to restore it. But overall, I think we need to put people back on the land. Moscow is home to 15 million. They say that it needs to have 30 million people. No, we need a large-scale program to put people back in the countryside. I live in a smaller town, and we have a tight, close-knit community, and you can't live as you want because everyone knows you, and you need to rise up to the occasion. It shouldn't be just a mega city that accounts for 1/4 of the public budget. All of the territories need to develop, and in this case we'll be able to talk about the restoration of churches, of life in rural areas, those who will contribute to our economy. It's the people who live in the countryside, who toil in the land. Thank you. So it's a question to everyone. So none of you have been engaged in compiling a list of the sites, religious sites that need to be restored, right? But is the work ongoing? We have a state program to develop cultural legacy that is designed to restore rundown monuments, but it's not systemic. We don't plan for the future. We've got a list of sites and we work on it, but what do we do next? I don't think that the government has this understanding. At least we're not aware of this. Well, I'm sure everyone would love to see religious sites being restored as soon as possible. I can agree with you that the federal budget will not allow for this, but we need to start with planning at least. So I guess the Russian People's Forum needs to discuss that as well. We need to invite the representatives of relevant ministries and agencies. We only have here the representatives of the Ministry of Science, but I'm sure it's not responsible for that. We don't have the representatives of from the Ministry of Culture here. Maybe we need to host a world or a religious forum, right? Maybe it could be hosted by St. Petersburg, and we would invite the representatives of the government and also get a sneak preview of how they're addressed in other countries. Now, on traditional values, the government approved or adopted the dictionary of the Russian language. So it's a regulation that has to be complied with by every citizen, and it will be used in the public operations. And it also focuses on traditional values. So that's something that we can print on a block of notes, on student books. Student exercise books. And I think no one defies traditional values right now, so we don't have the Ministry of School Education here, but we can appeal to them. I mean, your initiative could be implemented. I mean, the definition of traditional values can be incorporated on the back page of the exercise books. You also talked about the link between the economy and spirituality or religious beliefs. I guess we can talk about it at a separate session. And I can see that there are some lawyers, medical professionals, economists sitting here. But I think we need to invite entrepreneurs. We need to invite the members of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. I'll share a secret with you. Just recently, we received a few proposals from the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. They asked us to decriminalize some of the crimes because they do not inflict any material damage. And when I mention the same words, what about spiritual damage? What about moral damage? Abuse, low quality product that has not inflicted any material damage there, but it still inflicts some moral damage. And my colleagues agreed with me, and those proposals by the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs were rejected. So this decree is still in place. We just need to use it in a more proactive manner as we review different proposals. Now I'd like to give the floor to Albert Hazrat. Thank you very much, distinguished moderator, distinguished participants. With your permission, I would like to share the ideas that I jotted down beforehand. Very briefly, but I would like to focus on social status, on the support for the vulnerable, on the model of the Russian economy. We understand that there are Western models, there is the Islamic model, there is the Asian model, but what is our model? And since we are in St. Petersburg, that's where the bedrock of revolutions. And they used to say that the Bolsheviks used to say that it's just a mole, that religion is a mole on the body of the person, and there's nothing good about religion, that it's really useless. It's a parasite that feeds off human body. So what's the point of churches, temples? So under current legislation, we have a variety of concepts and terms. We have clergymen. That's one of the ways to describe this category. These are people who have a professional links to religion. They exercise religious service, and that's fully in line with Russian legislation. Taking into account these criteria, we can single out a category of clergymen with their status hierarchy, and those who work in religious institutions. So they are the so-called religious personnel, as a specific standalone group. So a clergyman is someone who has the blessing from the official church to conduct ceremonies in line with the canons and traditions of this religion, and that's the core activities of his profession, and that's regulated by religious norms mainly. A clergyman has a special status. This person has his or her place in the hierarchy. Religious personnel work at religious institutions in line with the contracts, employment contracts. They may have secular or religious education, and they, have a secondary role, play a secondary role, and their labor relations are in line with Russian legislation. We can identify different people who can ask for assistance. The first is, the reliance on our own forces, like we have a long-standing decree in place to support clergymen of the Russian Orthodox Church and their families. The second solution is looking for assistance from the government. That's the law 125. Under it, clergymen shall enjoy pensions, insurance, and medical assistance just like all Russian citizens. It's like, for example, you may have a temporary unemployment benefits, and regular leave has to be provided to the monks in monasteries. Assistance is provided to those whose income is lower than the minimum wage set in this region, in a specific region. There are also social guarantees for those who serve during the special military operation. What else is needed from the government to protect the status and the profession of clergymen? We need to establish high-tech, morality-based economy that relies on Russian cultural tradition, moral values, and best practices that would ensure the prosperity of our people, who would be able to keep its churches and its clergymen in good shape. We need to provide spiritual support to low-income people in their sermons. The preachers need to focus on the fact that the rich need to help the poor, and that's part of the scriptures. That's what corporate social responsibility is all about. There need to be mental concepts. We need to have a mentality of giving. And as Haditha says, when you're rich, part of your wealth comes from the poor people. And that has also been the stabilizer of consent. And if there are any deviations, that could lead to discontent, and it could lead to loss of statehood and to the fall of empires. The state must respect constructive dialogue with traditional Russian religions to maintain the overarching course towards promoting sovereign Russia. And we go back to the initial question. Are we mature enough to follow our own Russian model of the economy? I mean, it's history that dates back to thousands of years ago. These are guilds of merchants, the honest word, the honest promise of merchants. Or will we still stick to the foreign templates, economic templates? I wish you all successful deliberations.
Thank you very much. Let me comment on that and then ask for questions, but you can answer later. It's just because the deputy minister is in a hurry, but well, okay, she's not in a hurry. Then the question first. I cannot agree with you, unfortunately, that the labor contract doesn't exist to the extent that it is required, because I think that some of the clergy don't have any labor contracts. It's absolutely right. Well, yes, in the Russian Orthodox Church, inside of our procedures, we don't have any labor contracts because we have a different nature of relations, because the treaty is always the something which needs to be remunerated financially. But from the point of view of the Constitution, there is the law for the religious beliefs and consciousness. But if there is no labor contract, then the state seems to have envisaged certain compensation plans like pensions at a minimum level. And at the same time, nobody forbids to allocate some part of some income to the social funds. For example, at our university, we have such partners like Sberbank and VTB Bank, and they come and we can invite them to come and tell us how to efficiently work with funds. Now, question to the audience: who transfers or allocates money, some part of your income, to the foundations, insurance or social funds? Nobody. So I think that the similar situation is with the clergymen, but at the same time, nobody forgets them to do so. And if we consider it, it's an efficient tool, actually. We have just to promote the idea. Yet another aspect I thought I wanted to share. The movement of clergymen or some priests from one region to another. Does it mean that they can enjoy the right to have their needs resolved easily? For example, they need to give the children to the kindergarten or school. So perhaps we don't really can burden ourselves financially if we provide for such rights. But if there is some kind of a treaty between them and the state, and while they are serving the God, while they are taking care of us and are considering all our needs, but at the same time formally are not employed for money. So there is some area to consider. I think that what you have suggested here as the aspects to discuss and think about, I think that the representatives here of the All Russia People's Assembly can provide their feedback to that. And now the audience, do you have questions to the first two speakers? No? Okay, then let us proceed. And oh yes, there is a question. Excuse me, the interpreters don't hear the mic. Okay. Belong to the international Orthodox community or club in St. Petersburg. And I would like to proceed with the idea of providing assistance to the clergymen. I think that this is the aspect that can be discussed in mass media, and promotion of values, of spiritual values, is important, but to approach it from both the religious but also the national, state level, and so that these clubs, these communities could enjoy such support. Well, first of all, I think that the youth are one of the most reactive, proactive clusters of the society, and I think that the first support from the state that they require is so that they would not be burdened with something, so that there wouldn't be too much interference in their activities, because the youth, they are the targets of our of the values that we promote, and it's a very sensitive topic, because over recent 20 years, those people who had tried every effort to, or taken every effort to destroy our country, they did everything they could to distort the concept of patriotism. They tried to manifest it as something people should associate with negative things. And that's why I think we have to oppose this. And first of all, those religious leaders, those who are the priests, those who are leaders in the community, they need to assist the promotion of the real spiritual values. And I thank all the young people who are not too shy to manifest their own beliefs, because unfortunately there are too many people who take beliefs too personally and do not share their beliefs, while any religion, any belief by nature needs to be promoted and shared. And we should not be shy, we should not be too restricted in talking about our beliefs. And if somebody finds out that I am a religious person, then by my whole life I should convince that really this is about spiritual part of life. Thank you very much. I invite you to our meeting, and I'm sure that the representative of the World Russian Assembly will also appreciate your involvement. I'm giving the floor now to Mr. Shipkov, vice of the head of the World Russian Assembly and also rector of St. John the Theologians Russian Orthodox University. Dear colleagues, let us talk about theology. As the rector of the university, St. John the Theologians Russian Orthodox University, and as the head of the board of theology under the St. Petersburg State University, headed by the esteemed director present here, I can say that we should work with the document which is called Decree 809. What kind of paper is that? What kind of document? It's actually a theological document. And what does it tell us? It tells us something which we normally omit when we consider consider such documents. Let's look back into the beginning of the 20th century, the February Revolution and other events, and still today's times. The vision of material world and the spiritual world, how they developed. The liberal Marxists' point of view was based on the assumption that there are certain economic relations or relationships that shape social relationships, and the social relationships form the values as the baseline for the spiritual domain, and this forms the religious beliefs and philosophy. What is Decree H09 about? It tells us that the basis is formed by the values that are present in all the holy books. And in other words, this document tells us that the source of our values is the religion. And these values impact the social relationships, the socium, the relationships inside of the socium. And the social relationships form or shape the economic relationships. In other words, our President Putin in this document argues with the Marxist liberal theory and puts everything from the upside down position to the regular firm foot. And this document just overturns the vision of the relationships of a human person and the human being, a human being and the God, a human being and the state, and so on. So why do we recollect the merchant's word, which was firm and honest? Because this is where we want to return to. We want to re-establish it. And if we omit or neglect values, then we wouldn't be able to understand how to do so. In the 1990s, I had a conversation with a very respectful archbishop of the old Soviet format, as we say, the one who had gone through all the hardships of just implementing or executing his mission in life. And we were discussing the relationship of the state towards the church. And he said, no, the state is not the source of the dangers. It's not a threat. But where is the threat? The threat comes from money. Money is the evil. Why so? Because the church is entering now the new reality. Socialism has ceased in existence as the ideology, but the state exists, and the state, even before the social doctrine is written, which was written 10 years after our conversation, and yet at that time, as I remember it, the experienced clergymen, the archbishops understood where we were and where we were going to. So what is the relationship between the material and the spiritual? We have to find the answer in the people's experience. You know, they pray to John the Baptist, and in this prayer, we appeal to the apostle with a request for him to pray to the God for our health, physical and spiritual well-being, and richness, not only economic, but of different kinds, and by teaching us to do everything to glorify the God. And so, in other way, we pray for all the niceties, the health, the money, whatever you can call the abundance. We are asking so that we could turn it as the gratitude to God and and turn it for good. So this vision is something that we had forgotten, even though it had been the prayer written by John the Baptist in the 18th century. So it is about 200 plus years. And this is the model of the ideal relationships in this society. And in conclusion of my brief contribution, I would like to say that it would be very good both for the Russian Orthodox University and St. Petersburg Institute of Theology under the St. Petersburg State University, I think that it makes sense to start the economic faculty, which would teach and shape and form the financiers and economists, but with a deep theological background or education. Well, accept it, agreed. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Я думаю, что это приведет к тому, что
I think it will drive a change in the curriculum, in training the economic department. Well, I think we'll just offer our own perspective, a theological perspective. Actually, we train lawyers. We have a dedicated program, a special program. And it's a kind of dual degree. They also get it's a degree in theology and a degree in law. And we can do the same with the economists. I'm sure someone will ask you a question. I'm sure an economist will put a question to you. Do we have any specialists in this room? Yelena? Well, there are a lot of specialists here. No, we can set up the faculty of economics, but we've got it. Maybe we can set up a branch of it. Maybe you wanted to set up the faculty of economy at your John the Baptist institution. Well, we can set up a specific group and we would train them in economics, but that would be done as part of the Theological Institute. And we would train a completely new generation of economists. I think it just needs to be a joint degree. If we send students to the economists, we're going to lose them. We had sports and economy, and now economics, and here we have theology and economics. Well, I don't think the economists would allow us to set up to offer training in theology. No way. Remember, you had the School of Management, and you envy them and their graduates. Don't go down that path. Well, our lawyers will be trained in, altar activities, in being the good disciples. It's not like we were trained in the 1970s. I understand that theology education should be the foundation, the main brick that would pave the way for a totally new economy. Well, I guess we can set up a specialized, a chair or a department. Well, you're giving in, right? Well, it's such a complex issue. Any other questions? So he's got the postdoctorate degree in medicine and in law. Here, I've got a question. Can the entrepreneurial activities be moral? Can they have any spiritual value in it? Is this a fundamental issue? Maybe we can introduce religious studies, or definitely as an Orthodox person, I would like it to introduce Orthodox teachings, because we have Dostoevsky, we have art, everything is permitted with Orthodox beliefs. Okay, you please sit down. Now, Nikolai cited an interview by the Patriarch. It's an interview in the Kommersant newspaper, and there's a partial answer to your question in it. Gaining profits, if you use that profit for the benefit of God. Well, John the Baptist, right, said that. That would be great. I know, I talked to a businesswoman a few years ago, and she said, when I get easy money, I take 1/10 and give it to the church. And I asked her, do you just want to use the money to get to absolve your sins as indulgence? What do you mean by easy money? Is it the money you steal? Can you use stolen money for the glory of God, for God's glory? No way. So it's all about a spiritual value, spiritual attitude to money. I used to work at a radio station, and I wanted to do a program, a show about money. It's very, very challenging. I failed. What are the three temptations? Sex, power, and money that stand in the way towards salvation. Well, we're digressing a little bit. So there are so many topics that we raised, and each topic can be discussed at a separate session. I know that you got the text from some of the entrepreneurs, and they responded to what you said, right? True. Yes. Whatever you said about the social status of the clergyman was of interest to everyone, all the priests of all religions. So each of the interventions merits a dedicated roundtable. So I urge all of the clergymen, all those who are part of the global religious forum, to establish a religious forum that would run on a regular basis. So we need a forum that would preach values, traditions, religious beliefs. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Badmaev, He's deputy head of traditional Buddhist church in the northwestern district of Russia. I'll be brief. I'll share our Buddhist understanding of economy and finance. We study the cause and effect links of the events that surround us. We are guided by Buddha's words. The economy emerges from the key tenet, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal. Well, Russians steal while the other ethnic groups just take someone else's, right? So if you steal in this life, then in your next life, you'll be very poor. And I try to highlight this so that it's clear to everyone how these spiritual laws work. So, as you know, the first principle, the first rule is thou shalt not kill, because it will lead to war, and the war is underway. And, two big groups, two big nations that are relatives to each other, they're killing each other, and it's deplorable. But that's how it is. We have the seeds of enmity in one ethnic group against the other, and that's how it happened. So, why are we so poor right now? Because people want a free ride. People want an easy life. And that mentality strikes a chord with the people. And one of the first commandments in the Orthodox Church is industriousness. I think Southeast Asia is a role model, like China. No one compares with the Chinese, and Russians, are not on the same level with them. The latest news is that they want to transform the Gobi Desert into an oasis. And they've been able to put their labor to good use to change the landscape in several deserts. So if people have the will, they can change the climate, right? So economy-wise, everything depends on the will of the people. Indeed, we want to promote and nurture a mentality that wouldn't be after some easy money, after some low-hanging fruit. No. And that's why we keep hammering home to our entrepreneurs that we need to focus on spirituality. As for Buddhism, any person, any living human, is 90% spirituality. Money, economy is just 10%. It plays second fiddle. It's on the back burner. What you needed to be happy, I guess. Everyone wants to be happy. And, people got their habits. Everything depends on the mentality. And in this case, money may prevail. So one of the key goals is to establish cooperation between the religion and the government, and the presidential decree is critical in restoring spiritual, moral values. We need to have a deep understanding of this. And, from layman to people who exhibit a high level of spirituality, and there are people like this. We need to make this mentality a massive one. We need to nurture this mentality in everyone. And we as clergymen, we speak in favor of this. We champion this. Basically, it's about the battle between the good and the evil. We talk a lot about traditions. For centuries, it's been proven that we want our state to be strong, to be spiritually minded, that it would be home to kind and loving people, and in this case, they would be happy. Thank you. Dear friends, do we have any questions? None. Okay. Now I'd like to give the floor to Deputy Minister of Science, Ms. Petrova. Outline some of the questions, and over to you. Thank you. Distinguished moderator, distinguished colleagues, let me first thank you for the invitation. And SPIEF 2025 starts off for me with this discussion, and it's not a coincidence. Spiritual values are at the core of what we do. This Decree 809, signed by the Russian president, it outlines 17 key values. It's the foundation. It's the shared language that we use. The ministries and agencies and everyone in our country. On July the 1st, 2024, the Prime Minister signed an action plan to preserve the foundations of the Russian values. Well, it doesn't happen so fast. It's an enormous undertaking. And as one of the previous speakers said, we have finally defined those values. We had so many events, and we looked at the values from every angle. We did focus groups with students, teachers. We asked heads of universities, and we have different interpretations. Right now, we have aligned our understanding.
I also would like to take this occasion to thank Nikolai Mikhailovich for the fact that the St. Petersburg State University is the leader in the consortium of Russian universities, and it's going to be a platform which will call together representatives of different higher educational establishments in developing the methodological foundation for definition of what values are, so that to promote it, so to extend the reach out and develop different aspects. I also appreciated that today we are discussing this topic. It's of great importance. And just like Metropolitan Nikander told, it's not always that, and not everywhere, that we succeed in this. But the more platforms and dialogues we have, the more opportunities we'll have to extend this awareness to everybody and to involve everybody. So I wanted to say that the involvement of all the freshmen in the course of the foundations of the statehood in the educational programs at the universities, I think that was a great step forward, and I would like St. Petersburg State University for hosting one of such discussions. And I remember that the professorship really became aware of the depth of concepts in this course, and this program, this course, actually has cleared the way to understand that this education is the baseline for many educational programs. Next step was the development of the course in the history of religions in Russia. From the 1st of September, it will be included into the curricula of many establishments, and this will be also important not only for students but for teachers to master. It's important. And we also understand the higher education establishments are not just walls. These are the faculties, the people who teach, who are interacting with the students. And it's for the third year in a row that we have been involving our employees in their work with the teachers and further training of the teachers in particular in the history of religions and the foundations of the statehood, and this all, including other measures, form the foundation of the edifice for our common understanding of real knowledge. And of course, education does not come easy. It shouldn't come easy, because if this wall today is yellow, tomorrow it may be green because of the change of the color of the paint, or perhaps because it will be repainted. In a similar way, I could explain how students will change their opinions and outlooks, because we all strive that when they graduate, they will be more aware of their value to the state, to the statehood. And this decree 809 unifies now everybody who works with the youth in realization of their talents and in bringing in them real patriots. Social responsibility is one of the tools of teaching them how to serve the society, the state, through volunteering, through the awareness of the mission of serving to the purposes of the good. And so here we speak about their perception of the good, their perception of the current events and at large. And I would like to thank representatives of all the conventions here, because it's our common objective, our unified objective. And I'm very happy to see also postgraduate students who help us a lot. Together with the Russian Orthodox Church, we work very closely in building new ways for interaction. So the interaction that makes everyone, all the participants, stronger. It's a tool that will allow us, all our greater community, to be sure that the graduates are spiritually sound people, healthy people, who will be forging, who will be reinforcing the strength, the power of our country, the might of our country. And together with the State University in St. Petersburg, we will find more co-thinkers in this bigger community. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now questions. Olga Viktorovna. I'm Ekaterina. I'm a professor of economic studies and also the teacher of the Orthodox Church of the Shostakovich family in St. Petersburg. The question is, are there interactions of your ministry with other government structures, like Ministry of Secondary Education, who are not present here? Because if nothing is done before higher education, then whatever you do will turn into another version of the course or program of the Marxist-Leninist theory. I remember when I was a student, our attitude towards such course, we just took it for granted, but not as the development stage. And if it happens this time again, then this generation will not become the active participants of the society as we envisage it. Well, of course, we interact with other bodies, Ministry of Secondary Education, but when we understand the student enters the higher education, he comes from school and with the background of the school. And at the school level, much is being done. And this program or school discipline called the talk about the important, which has been introduced recently. And you see, our youth are very creative, very interested, and if we create the right environment and drive them in the right direction, they will develop in this direction. Here I'm talking about task force groups where we can hear each other, and we have, for example, the recent initiative, the program that put together the Ministry of Enlightenment, the Ministry of Science and Education, the Ministry of Secondary Education. So we heard each other and started developing the model of building up the the generation according to the common objectives, and the document which will pave this road till the year 2040 will allow us in the future to understand in a more clear way what it is all about. Of course, we see the challenges and we understand what we have to face currently. But when we become more realistic and put our foot on the ground, and we understand that the ministries at the levels of the regions, of the cities, are very helpful in building the framework for implementation of our strategies. And when we understand the values as the guidelines, we can then promote them and disseminate them. And another aspect I wanted to talk about, the initiative that offered the young people to choose from the list of values some specific value and interpret it or explain it for others. And I was blamed for this initiative. They said, well, now you are overburdening the schools children with a new objective. And I said, yes, but that's important. So, when students really interpret things from their own perspective and their own vision, then all things become easy. Because now, while teachers agree with me that students are a great generation of talented people, still we have also to direct these students, and this particular attention should and is being paid to the freshmen. Those students where we present to them the practical side of things, and where we discuss implementation of certain values and we discuss, and of course there are questions that students ask, and of course the teachers should have the answers which would be rooted in the information and their own awareness. Thank you very much. But I'm afraid that we are running short of time, but nevertheless, those who asked the question to you, so first I remember that Metropolitan Nikandar first just mentioned you in his presentation, but others as well. So what I want to comment is that whether we call it a discipline or program, it should be either the clinics, that's the way we call them at the State University in St. Petersburg. So what I'm talking about is when the students, whether they teach law or they study law or medicine or IT or whatever. So in the course of their study, they implement certain support services that they for free offer to people, and by doing so they have a mission of helping others. But let us look at the problem of the educational standards. Well, Katerina, you mentioned it, that if we grow the number of disciplines, then it will be another problem. Well, at our university, we increased the number of disciplines, but by doing the following. We asked the students to practically help others, not as the discipline which is called help others, but we have these initiatives that unite the students of law, students of healthcare, students of Oriental studies, and so on and so on. And this is a part of educational program and also involves teachers. So perhaps then our education should be rechanneled in this direction so that the standard educational should be changed. The methods should be different. So I, about 8 years ago, wrote an article about educational standards, about journalism, legal studies, and so on. But I will give an example from journalism, but it's relevant to any profession. A journalist needs to be to know this, needs to be able to do so, and so on. But is it written that this professional, this graduate, has to share or possess the values that are relevant to the document we mentioned again and again, Decree 809? So does it mean that the standard guarantees this person, the journalist, having the diploma, has to manifest these values, prove them? Or shouldn't we withdraw the diploma from some graduates if they do not comply with the requirements in terms of values? So now we are finalizing the work with the administration of President in extending the this. Like in Russia, we have about 500 universities and higher educational establishments. But how can they be responsible for the entire work with the youth if all the other educational establishments are not involved at other levels? So that's why I think that the minister should have a different authority, and the vice or deputy minister has to have not necessarily the different authority, but the standard should be different so that it would prescribe not only the requirement to prove the knowledge level at the participant quality level, but also to deprive of the diploma if this graduate or the student does not share values and is the cause of some social disturbances. So to share the values or to oppose the values, this is the question. Can the healthcare worker smoke? It's a great question. So many smoke, and ask everybody. People say that healthcare workers, of course, and smoking should not be the same person, and so there needs to be an upgraded standard. The standard who has not just acquired knowledge and skills, but values, the values that are manifested in the lifestyle, in the habits, and so on. And now let me give the floor to Aaron Yurevich, the chief military rabbi of Russia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to start with a proverb. When you have economic issues, talk to Gurevich. Who's Gurevich? Any Gurevich. Well, you know, we've had some serious deliberations. Well, you know, I had a group mate, a classmate who used to be Gurevich, then Lakman, and then again Gurevich. Well, you know, we've had Egyptian pyramids, we've had civilization following civilizations, and now we live in going through the Christian civilization. And we can see the underlying values, you know, commandments, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet what belongs to someone else, and that's applies to our thinking as well as to our actions, and it's now part of religious traditions. And you know, it's all of the religions preach the same. It applies, you know, it applies to corruption as well. But human nature has not really changed. Adam sinned, and that's where it all started. And we still have those desires. Sometimes it's a desire to earn illegally. And on the day of the final judgment, you wouldn't be asked how much you prayed, how much you sinned. You would be asked whether, you labored in an appropriate manner. And so you have to work, you have to contribute to the economy. And as I was riding on the train yesterday, I was reading the interview by the patriarch, and he said that everything depends not just on demand, but also on legislation. Legislation provides the right regulation, including through the decree 709. But the patriarch also said that some jurisdictions decriminalize drugs, and that's where that may lead to the demise of humanity, and those windfalls that come together with drug trafficking, they will definitely lead to that tragic final. One of the topics on our agenda today is subsidies, funding for religious education. We talked a lot about spiritual upbringing, and you've now put it into practical perspective, but I can relate to what you said. I haven't heard any specific practical, down-to-earth answer. As for the grants by the government, we can analyze the existing scenario. We have the fund to support Islamic education. For 2 years, we've had the fund to support Buddhist education. Let's look at the outcomes. The government wants to promote the specific area of religious education, and through that we may see better upbringing, cognizing God, reading the Holy Scriptures. People cannot remain indifferent. They need to take it closer to their heart. That's the vocation of the theologist. Maybe I'm too optimistic. So we need religious education, and we stand for religious education. So if the government does channel some funding through the funds, through the Ministry of Education, to those institutions who praise religions here and abroad, that's fine. If they translate Holy Scriptures from ancient languages, fine. It's important for the Jews of Russia to study Yiddish, and it's even used on the territory of the Jewish Autonomous Region. There are a lot of ways of how the government can support us. Well, I'm a little bit moving into Jewish and Judaism. But the bottom line is, all of the business model that we have in a conventional society, they are aligned with the morality that is the benchmark. Like every community has a business club, and we have the representatives of the St. Petersburg community, and they run this business club here. It means that spiritual leaders guide and inform entrepreneurs on how they need to conduct or how they need to act during negotiations, on what they have to give to the needy, to the poor. So these are day-to-day operations. And we have the chief rabbi of St. Petersburg. He can confirm that. I guess well, yeah, I mean, there was a girl who came over to me and shared her story with us, and it has to be an interactive fabric. And our mission and our destinies have to be guided and informed by an understanding of biblical truths. Do we have any questions? One question. But we still have 2 speakers and we have 5 minutes left. I'll be brief. Thank you for your intervention. My name is Lydia. I represent the St. Petersburg University. And, well, as you said, if there are any questions, you would better ask Gurevich. So, jumping on your joke, and you're the representative of one of the ancient, or maybe the most ancient religions. And so here's my question. If everything's created God, money is also created by God, right? Well, a kind of a philosophical question. Well, our holy book says that at a certain point in time, the wise men saw that the evil source is in money, is concentrated in money, and they wanted to shut it down. They wanted to eradicate this phenomenon, to uproot this. But the outcome was not very successful. People need an equivalent of value. That's the bottom line. And there's the evil part in money as well. So it's a complicated issue, The evil has to manifest itself in some ways. Well, you only have 1 minute. I'll be brief. Well, we have so many tools, legal and practical, thanks to our patriarch and the president, but there are still questions that emerge. And well, actually, we can say that we can also learn today that the clergymen are not in employment contract with the church, and that many of the sites are being restored, but no one is asking the church on what these facilities should be. And we also heard a piece of advice that the economy needs to be guided by religious values, spiritual values. We need to, talk more about the language, talk more about definitions. The economists, lawyers, secular people have a different perspectives at the same issues, and that's why the patriarch highlighted that in his interview. And Nikolai, your mission is of critical importance. It's really will help us to improve our mentality in legislation, in economics. We need to keep designing specific, practical, down-to-earth tools. That's where religion and economics converge. I'm sorry we don't have questions to the answers. We have to give the floor to our final speaker. I hope you can hear me. Distinguished colleagues. So I think I just need to raise a glass, to raise a toast, so to speak. I've got a book, and that's where I put all of my ideas. So the bottom line is, all of the representatives of our main religion said that the values in scriptures need to be incorporated into the new paradigm of our education in a balanced way, in a very prudent way. It needs to be embedded, not in a straightforward manner, not bluntly, but in an implicit way. It needs to be these core values. The core values are the same, but without them, we're nobody. And so it's a must-have. So we need to align this. So what's needed is that these courses need to be together. These courses need to complement each other. It shouldn't be about apples and oranges, right? So we need to establish a consortium of universities and colleges, and that should be its mission. Thank you. Friends, we've exhausted our time, and I'd like to thank everyone. Well, I'll have to give you the floor. I'm from the Lutheran Church. Just a piece of advice. It's just every book has a bibliography. So we mentioned some holy scriptures. We have the book of Nehemiah, and that's exactly what it says. It talks about religion, about the links to the states, about the law that was finally proclaimed. It's not just for the Christians, but for the Jews, and I'm sure that the Muslims and the Buddhists will enjoy that, and everyone else. I'm sorry for taking up the time. Thank you.
Слышите, о чем